When you look at the conflict in the Middle East, it's easy to see just pure chaos, right? You got missile strikes, proxy attacks, threats escalating all over the place. But what if I told you it's not chaos at all? What if it's actually a strategic game with rules, predictable moves, and a logical, if very dangerous, conclusion?
That's the big question we're going to tackle right now. We're going to use the cold, hard logic of game theory to strip away all the noise, all the headlines, and see if we can find the hidden logic in what seems like a totally unpredictable fight.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll define the game and its players. Then we'll dig into America's strategic trap and follow that up with Iran's really clever countermoves. After that, we'll look at why the whole situation is so unstable, why America might actually be on a losing path, and finally, we'll deliver the stark verdict of game theory.
Okay, let's dive right in. Look, to understand any game, whether it's chess or geopolitics, you've got to know three basic things. Who's playing? What moves can they make, and what do they get if they win? So here are the key players on this massive board. First up, you've got the United States, and its main goal is simple: stay the top dog on the world stage. Then there's Iran, which wants to be the dominant power in its own backyard, and that means pushing the US out. But it's not a two-player game. You've got Israel, laser-focused on its own security. You have the Gulf states, basically just trying to protect their economies and hold on to power. And then you have Iran's proxies, like the Houthis, who are like strategic pawns, designed to cause trouble on the cheap. And don't forget, you've got Russia and China, just watching from the sidelines, looking for any chance they can get to challenge American power.
All right, our first key concept, the zero-sum game. Just think of it like a game of poker. There's a fixed amount of money on the table. For me to win $1, someone else has to lose $1. You can't just make the pie bigger. You can only fight over who gets which slice.
And this right here is where the whole problem really starts. Both the US and Iran see this as a zero-sum game. From Washington's perspective, any win for Iran is a direct loss for America's global power. But from Tehran's perspective, any US success in the region is a direct threat to its own survival. They're both playing to win, but they're playing on totally different scales, one global, one regional. And that fundamental mismatch is why they keep clashing.
Okay, so how is America actually playing its hands here? Well, when you look at it through the lens of game theory, it turns out it's caught in a classic and pretty nasty strategic trap.
This trap has a name, the prisoner's dilemma. Imagine this. Two criminals get caught and are put in separate interrogation rooms. The cops tell each one, if you both stay quiet, you each get 1 year in jail. But if you rat out your partner and he stays quiet, you walk free and he gets 10 years. If you both rat each other out, you both get 5 years. So what do? Well, no matter what your partner does, your best personal move is always to rat them out. But here's the kicker. When you both do that, you both end up with a way worse outcome than if you had just trusted each other and stayed quiet.
Now, let's map this onto the US and Iran. Just follow the logic with me. Let's say Iran decides to rebel. That's the column on the right. What's America's best move? To punish. Okay, now let's say Iran decides to cooperate. That's the left column. What's America's best move then? Well, it's still to punish, to try and maximize its gains. So from a purely short-term, rational point of view, America's best move always seems to be punish. And for Iran, their best move is pretty much always to rebel. And look where that lands them. Both sides are locked in that bottom right box, a super costly, endless conflict, which is actually the worst possible outcome for both of them.
This brings us to a really important idea, called a dominant strategy. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's the one move that seems like your best option, no matter what the other guy does. It feels like the smart, safe play. But as we just saw, it can lock you into a path that leads straight to disaster.
And that's the bottom line here. The United States is strategically trapped. Its dominant strategy, punish Iran with sanctions, with military strikes, and Iran's dominant strategy, to rebel and push back, they create this vicious cycle. Both sides are making what they think are their most rational moves, but all it's doing is making them both worse off in the long run.
So, while America is stuck in this trap, Iran is playing a totally different game. It's pulling off this brilliant and, frankly, really effective counter-strategy, a war of asymmetric endurance.
First off, just take a look at this number, $20,000. That's about what it costs to make one of Iran's main offensive weapons, the Shahed drone. Cheap, right?
Now, look at this number. Over $3 million. That is the price tag for a single US Patriot missile that's used to shoot one of those $20,000 drones out of the sky.
And this, right here, illustrates Iran's core strategy perfectly.
They're turning this conflict into a math problem that the US just can't solve forever. For every dollar Iran spends trying to inflict damage, the US and its allies have to spend $150 or more on defense. See, Iran doesn't have to win on the battlefield. It just has to make the game too expensive for America to keep playing.
And they combine this economic warfare with the strategy called Brinkmanship. Think of it like that old game of chicken, where two cars drive straight at each other, and the first one to swerve is the loser. Iran does this by threatening to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is basically the world's oil highway. It's creating this massive risk, betting that the US and its allies, who have a lot more to lose from a global economic collapse, will be the ones to swerve first.
So why does anyone even take these threats seriously? Well, it comes down to an idea from the strategist Thomas Schelling, which is that for a threat to work, your opponent has to truly believe you're crazy enough to go through with it. And Iran has shown again and again that it's willing to absorb incredible amounts of pain and take enormous risks. That's what makes its threats credible enough to keep the US from launching an all-out war.
So we have America stuck in a trap, and Iran playing this really savvy long game. You'd think that would settle into some kind of predictable, tense stalemate, right? Like a new Cold War. But it doesn't. And the reason why reveals the most complex and maybe the most dangerous part of this whole thing.
The real source of all the instability comes down to one simple but really profound fact. The main actors, they aren't even playing the same game.
What you actually have are four completely different strategies colliding on the same battlefield. The US is trying to manage the crisis, keep a lid on it. Israel is trying to actually break the Iranian regime itself. Iran, like we've seen, is playing the long war of attrition. And the Gulf states, they're just trying to keep the oil flowing and their economies from collapsing. Game theorists call this a stacked game, and it's basically a recipe for chaos.
This brings us to another cool concept, the Nash Equilibrium. It's basically a stable outcome where every player has made their best possible move considering what everyone else has done. It's that no regrets point where nobody has an incentive to change their strategy. But here's the thing. Because the four main players want completely different things, a stable state like that can't exist. The system can't settle down. And all that constant chaos, it actually helps the one player who isn't trying to keep things stable. It favors Iran.
This built-in instability brings us to the end game. Because in game theory, every single player has what's called an exit threshold. That's the point where the cost of continuing to play is just way higher than any possible reward you could get for winning.
And if you look at it from a pure game theory perspective, America is flashing a bunch of warning lights that it's getting close to that threshold. We're seeing reports that critical military stockpiles are being used up way too fast. The financial cost, like we saw with the missile-to-drone ratio, is becoming astronomical. And maybe the most important signal of all, it's getting harder and harder to sell an endless, expensive conflict to the public back home. In game theory, these are all clear signs that a player is realizing the game is costing too much.
So, if we take a step back from all the politics, all the emotion, all the ideology, and just listen to the cold, hard logic of the game we've just mapped out, what's the final verdict?
The verdict is pretty stark. The models show that America is on a losing strategic path. Iran's whole strategy, this war of attrition, is perfectly designed to exploit America's biggest weaknesses, its high costs, and its need for a quick, clean win. The endgame here probably isn't a victory parade for anyone. It's what's called a hurting stalemate, just a grinding, ugly, persistent conflict where the side that can tolerate more pain and spend less money is the one that ultimately comes out ahead.
And that leaves us with one last big question. Game theory teaches us that rational players do not keep playing a game they know they're going to lose. So if the current game is unwinnable for the United States, is the only truly rational move left to stop playing this game and start playing a completely different one?